If we go back to the very beginning, to those innocent breakfast tables, the picture was crystal clear. Walter Jr. and me, we were an ordinary, struggling family, trying to hold it together. The audience usually fixates on Walter's grand transformation from high school chemistry teacher to drug lord. But in those early frames, my role was distinct. I was the one keeping this house standing. With Walter's passivity and detachment back then, I had to be the one steering the ship. Everyone judged me for being too controlling. But for that system to work, for the wheels to keep turning, someone had to have their hands on the wheel. Then came the diagnosis: cancer. In that moment, I thought the world had stopped, but I immediately went into solution mode. Treatment costs, doctors, support groups. While I was busy fighting for his life, Walter had already quietly turned down a different path. When that infamous second cell phone issue started, it didn't take long for me to realize something was wrong. I remember him looking me dead in the eye and saying, "I went for a walk." A wife knows when her husband has changed. I knew, but honestly, the worst-case scenario in my head was another woman, and looking back, I prayed it was just an affair. The moment I learned the truth, that kitchen scene where Walter confessed he wasn't just sick, but he was cooking meth, that was the breaking point. For years, people have asked, why didn't she go to the police right then? Why didn't she pick up the phone? The answer was simple, but impossible to swallow. I was pregnant, my husband had days to live, and my son worshipped the ground his father walked on. If I had gone to the police, Walter would have died alone and miserable in a cell. My son's life would have been destroyed. We would have lost the house, and we would have been left penniless and branded. It wasn't an eagerness to be an accomplice. It was choosing the lesser of two evils. I stayed silent to keep my family from shattering right then and there. Of course, this wasn't sustainable. I wanted a divorce. I tried to kick him out. I threatened to go to the cops. But Walter didn't leave. He hid behind that constant excuse: I'm doing it for my family. And at some point, I had to make a logical choice. If we were in this dirty business, we had to ensure we didn't get caught. The Ted Bennick affair, most of you saw that as betrayal, but that was a desperate gasp for air in a life where I had lost all control. It was an escape. Was it rational? No. But psychologically, I needed to breathe, or I was going to suffocate. Then, the dynamic shifted. Walter was a brilliant chemist, yes, but he was a terrible criminal. The places he hid money, the lies he told, it was amateur hour. That is exactly where I stepped in, the car wash. Why? Because when the IRS eventually came knocking, Walter's ridiculous "I gambled it" lie wouldn't have saved us. We needed a story. We needed clean income. We needed a legal facade. I didn't commit the crime, but I managed it so we could survive it. When I bought that car wash, I was no longer just a mother. I had become a strategist, partnering with a criminal to protect her family from prison and ruin. It wasn't a game, it was survival mathematics. But Walter's ego, that uncontrollable ego, changed everything. I will never forget the night I told him he was in danger, that we had to stop. He turned to me and said, "I am the danger." That sentence was the moment the power balance in our home was destroyed forever. The sick, helpless husband was gone, replaced by a man who worshipped his own dangerous power. From that point on, my priorities shifted from protecting him to protecting my children from him, getting them out of the house, sending them to Nevada. It was all to get them away from the toxic blast radius Walter had created. The greatest torture during this time was those family dinners with Hank and Marie. Think about it. Our brother Noel is a DEA agent hunting Heisenberg, and we are having a barbecue with him in the backyard. I had to smile. I had to play the part. One slip up, one wrong word, and it would all be over. Walter ignored the risk. He even seemed to get a sick thrill out of it. But me, my heart stopped every time I heard a police siren. It is impossible to describe that level of stress. Then came the storage unit, that massive pile of cash. Walter didn't even know how much money was there. When I stood in front of that pile, the reality hit me physically. It was impossible to launder that much money. The dream of a secure future for my kids had been replaced by a physical threat. There was blood on that money. Gus Fehring, the cartel, the threat, they were at our doorstep. That's why I stood in that storage unit and asked Walter, how much is enough? Because that money wasn't security anymore. It was our tombstone. And the end, I feared, finally arrived. The day Hank found out. When we met Hank at that diner, I will never forget the look on his face. It wasn't just anger. It was a deep, shattering sense of betrayal. He tried to get me to talk, but again, I stayed silent. What? Because if I gave Walter up, I would be implicated as an accomplice, and the children would be left orphans of the system. That was the moment the bond with my sister and brother-in-law was severed. The family was broken. What followed was pure chaos. Hank's death. When Walter came home in a panic shouting, "We're leaving," I saw Hank's death on his face. He didn't need to say it. In that moment, logic died, strategy died. When I grabbed that knife, I wasn't attacking my husband. I was a mother defending her cubs from a killer who had entered our home. When Junior stepped in and called the police, that was the moment Walter truly lost. Not his empire, not his money. He realized it was over when his own family looked at him as the enemy. After everything fell apart, that final phone call, perhaps it was the only kindness Walter ever showed me, though it took me time to understand it. He screamed at me on the phone. He called me names. He humiliated me. He knew the police were listening. Every word he said was a scripted performance designed to exonerate me, to make it look like I knew nothing, like he forced me into everything. It was his twisted way of saying goodbye, a final move to save me from prison, an apology. Maybe, but the cost was too high. So, what was the result? Walter is dead. Hank is dead. Our reputation, our money, our home, all gone. As I sit in this rundown apartment, through the cigarette smoke, I look back. I'm not a winner or a loser. I am just the survivor left in the rubble. Was I a villain? No. I was just someone forced to make impossible choices at the worst possible times. Someone who paved the road to her own ruin while trying to protect her family. The bill for that exciting show you watched, well, at the end of the day, that bill was sent to me, and I will be paying it for the rest of my life.